Hi, everyone. This is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy. And be sure to check out our Facebook page and our newsletter and find us on YouTube, all with the Italian Roots and Genealogy. And we have a special video today with a great group of people that come from Biccari, near Bari, and in Puglia. So welcome, everybody.
Thanks, Bob.
Good morning, Bob.
Good morning.
So let's just go around the table and introduce yourselves and let us know what town you're from, if it's not from Biccari, and also what year your family immigrated to the U.S. or what year you arrived. So Rich, why don't you kick it off?
Right. Once again, Bob, thanks for hosting us. I mean, I think everybody here has a special connection to that town. You know, I'm the grandson of immigrants on my maternal side that came from Biccari. My grandfather, Agnello, came in 1902. And then my grandmother, also from Biccari, Lisa Basili, came in 1910. They settled in Philadelphia, and quite frankly, the rest is history.
And Carla, how about you?
My great-grandfather, Salvatore Capiello, immigrated to Auburn, New York in 1902. And I know some of you here are D'Imperio descendants or relations, and it was Salvatore's sister Maria Capiello who married Giuseppe D'Imperio. So that's how we're connected. I live in South Carolina. I'm representing Southern Italy in the south of the United States, I think, here. And I did take my family last fall to Biccari. There I am with the sign. We arrived perfectly during the rest period. So that was unfortunate for us. But it was great just to place our feet on the same soil in the same village as our ancestors. And it is through my Capiello family that I am seeking my dual citizenship. So it's great to feel even more connected to them that way.
Paolo?
Yes, I totally was made in Biccari, and I've been meaning to actually have a tattoo on my arm or on my rear that says "Made in Italy." So I've been meaning to. So I'm totally. My father was Giuseppe Saltarella in Biccari. He was a shoemaker. He married my mother in 1929. It's a long story how that we happened to come in 1964. My father was here from 1921. My aunt, his sister, and brother Donato were here earlier with the rest of the other Biccaris at that time, such who was that mentioned? That Carla, the Biccari of the families that were in Auburn. So I emigrated with my sister, my mother, in 1964 to Auburn, New York. And I've been here ever since, involved in the Italian community, a barber since the age of 11. I came to Auburn, and then I opened up a barbershop on my own, and been involved in the community. So my sister, Rose, my brother Anthony, were able to come here because they were born while my father was a United States citizen. He stayed in Auburn, going back and forth to Italy from 1929 when he married my mother, and then returning back and forth because of complications with my mother, not able to attend, stupid things. But then my mother came finally, and that's how we are. So this is it. So, and I do an Italian-American program, as I mentioned to you, each Sunday morning since 1978. Now I am on Facebook and Instagram. It's called Carosello Italiano with Paolo. So if you'd like to join me, and we talk about the Italian heritage and also a Biccari that I talked about just from the first or the third show that we did. So we just started this week, and I'm glad to be on here with all you Biccaris too. So it's a pleasure. So
yeah, and Carla was just asking Apollo, what's your last name? Because it'd be interesting to find out if you and Carla's families knew each other in Auburn back then.
Mhm.
Well, you know what happened? My uncle, my zio Donadio, changed his name to Sandrelli to shorten it. And then was my aunt also was Saltarella, Anna. And my father, when he came, he kept his last name Saltarella. But then when we came in 1964, or my brother in 1959, they made a mistake on our last name at the American consulate in Naples. So we kept Saltarella. So it's very difficult for us, really, my kids, to follow now, as you know, Bob, about the genealogy, because of that last vowel instead of the A, it's an O. That's
Yeah,
it.
that happened a lot, right?
Yes.
Peg, how about you?
I'm the granddaughter of immigrants, and I from Biccari. My grandfather came in 1899, and his father came in 1889 to Philadelphia. And he traveled back and forth importing goods, olive oil, etc., to sell. He married Lucia Honorato, who also was born in Biccari. She came in 1906, or I should say Donato married my grandmother, Lucia Honorato, born they came in 1906 with her father and her uncle Vincenzo Sesa. Two of her brothers were already here, and then her mother, Maria Sesa, actually came a year later. And the Honoratos eventually moved to Geneva, New York, and her sisters spread out when they got married to Auburn, Rochester, and Syracuse in New York. But eventually, and my grandmother moved up there and lived there for a little while with Donato and their 3 kids, and had more kids, including my father. And then they moved back to Philadelphia around 1937. But yes, they're all from Biccari. And when I look at my trees, I think of all the names. I have Cecchias, De Imperios, Cesas, Paradas, all of them like Biccari names in my family tree.
Nice, that's nice. Mary Ann, how about you?
My husband's family is Cristenziano, and it was originally spelled without the H. Immigration did that. My father-in-law's father, so my husband's grandfather, was born in Biccari in or around 1880. We're not positive of the date. He married Fidelia Cecchia, who was also born in Biccari, and they were married in the United States. They settled in Philadelphia, and they were married in 1899. There's very little that we know. We were there in 13. I went over with my 3 children, and we met a very nice man that took us around and had the same last name, but no relation, and filled us in on a lot of information. That's about all we know. I did go and register with the Latter-day Saints genealogy department, and they were extremely helpful. And they gave us the names of my husband's great uncles. They were all boys. Some of them came and went back, and some of them stayed here. That's about all I know. Thank you.
And that's a good point, because Family Search, they're a great organization, and they do a free consultation and everything, and
Yes.
usually very, very helpful group, and for free. I tell everybody to start there. A lot of people want to start with Ancestry, but I tell them to start with Family Search.
Yes, because I did Ancestry, and Family Search was much better. I would recommend that.
Lucia, how about you?
So I currently live in New Jersey, but my father is a Galdi, and he came in the early 1960s, and they settled in Tacony. They call that a portion of Tacony and South Philly, little Little Biccari, because that's where most of the Biccaris settled. My mother's family, my mother was born here, but her parents were both from Italy. My grandmother was from Avellino, and my grandfather was Biccaris. So I'm kind of like Paolo. I'm more Biccaris than American, because my parents went on a long honeymoon. My dad was trying to get my mom to live in Italy, and they were there for 6 months. So my mother carried me for 5 months there. So technically,
Wow.
I'm more. I was created in Italy.
And transported to America.
Yeah.
I keep trying to convince my wife that we need to go live there, but she's not ready for that yet.
Yeah. So so now I'm in the process. I just became a resident of Biccari. My mother passed away 2 years ago, and she owned the homestead that's from 400 AD. I mean, it's been in our family for I'd be the fifth generation, but the house dates back to 400 AD.
Wow, that's unbelievable. That's fantastic.
We restored it and keeping it in the family and doing other things there now with it.
You need to send us pictures of that house.
I can do before and after. Parts
Yes.
of our house are actually in the I think it's the University of Rome. When they took it apart, they found bamboo holding up the archways, and that's how we figured out that it was from 400 AD.
Wow.
That's incredible. That's
What a great
that's some
story.
story. Yeah. Yeah. Elaine, how about you?
My name is Elaine Champy. I currently live in Washington, D.C., but I grew up in North Jersey, in Somerville, which is not too far from Morristown, which was mentioned earlier. I also worked in Morristown for a long time. But I can trace both of my paternal grandparents and their families back, Biccari, pretty far back. The most recent date I can find that anyone came to America on either one of their sides was probably the late 1880s. My grandparents, though, my closest relatives, came in 1922 together on a boat. They were childhood sweethearts in Biccari, lived down the street from each other, a couple of doors down on Via Madonna delle Grazie in Biccari. Came over in 1922, got married the next year in 1923. They lived in New York, North Jersey, because that's where their family members were kind of living at that point. Soon after they got married in 1923, they moved to Tacony, of course, and my father was born there in 1924. They lived there for a number of years. My grandfather was a barber there. He had a barber shop there for a number of years. For some reason, they moved back to New Jersey, the North Plainfield area. My grandmother's parents were there, I believe. So they then end up living there the rest of their lives. But my grandfather's, one of his sisters, Rosa, who married a Donato Tumolo, lived in Tacony for their entire lives and had their children there. And so they maintained a connection to Tacony for the rest of their lives. And I went to Biccari a few times, most recently last year. Came to know some relatives on both of my grandmother and my grandfather's side, which is very exciting, and learned that both of their family homes are still in the family. So hopefully when I go back next year, I'll be able to see inside both of the family homes where I believe my grandparents were born. So that will be exciting.
Great.
Yeah, that's super.
Wonderful news.
That's super. Yeah, I got to see my grandmother's home in Torito, but we didn't get to go inside. And on my father's side, one of the homes that's in Calabria was bought by somebody in, like, I don't know, 30, 40, maybe more years ago. And it's still there, and he let us in, but it's a massive home, but it's in such disrepair. It's really, really sad. And the town wanted to buy it. And they wanted to buy it and restore it, and the guy won't sell it.
Wow.
Jovina, how about you?
Yes, thank you. So Jovina
is my legal birth name. They call me Joanne here in the States. At some point, I think that transitioned and, it became Joanne, but legally it is Jovina. My maiden name is Tursi. So that's the Biccari's the surname. I too was made in Italy. I was born in Biccari. And my mother, my sister, and I emigrated in 1969. I was 3 years old. But my story is a little bit two-part, I guess. You could say the immigration story is two-part, starting with my paternal grandfather. His name was Francesco Saverio Tursi. And he was married, had 2 children in Biccari. And at some point, he decided to go to Philadelphia, I think, with the rest of the people that were going over. It must have been like the early 1900s. I'm not sure of the exact date. So he was in Philadelphia, worked there a little bit, and then at some point he joined the U.S. Army. I don't know how that came about exactly, like if that was a voluntary, I guess it was voluntary, but I don't know how that exactly happened. But he did join the U.S. military, served in the military, and was honorably discharged in 1919. So at that point, he decided to go back to Biccari. And I guess the pull was so strong, and he just wanted to reunite with his family. And he went back to Biccari, raised his family, had 3 more children, my father included, Giovanni Tursi, raised his family. And then fast forward to 1967. Okay. So 1967, my father already married with 2 children, me and my sister, we were very, very young. My father owned a bar in Biccari called Bar Centrale, which is the bar. It is a current day bar, but I think it's a private social club right now. But it's located in Via Umberto. That's where they have the concerts in the summertime. So when you go there, you can look in the corner, and that bar still exists. So my father owned and operated that bar, but somehow, because he had the the birthright of the U.S. citizenship, at some point he had the desire to come to America. So at that, and my mother wasn't very happy about it because she had to leave her family, and her family, the Vecchiolas, they were business owners themselves. They transported wheat, and they had a whole business themselves. So she really didn't want to come. But my father said, well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sell the bar, because he didn't want to do that any longer. So he sold the bar, came to Newark, New Jersey, where he, met, and I guess there were some other people from Biccari in Newark at that time. And so he, came here, he established work. And then 2 years later, he called for my mother, my sister, and I. And that's how we came to live in New Jersey. So I was brought up in Newark, New Jersey. And then it's a funny story how it kind of like, it circles back around, because we went back and forth every summer. Until I was I was 15, 16 years old. So the ties that I have to my cousins, my first cousins, are still there. My aunts and uncles, a lot of them passed. I do have one surviving aunt that lives, that is from Biccari, but she lives in Pescara now. But and then all my cousins on both sides, my mother's side and my father's side, are still there, and we're very, very, very close. So I have, very, very strong ties to Biccari still. I remember as a young girl, like just leaving those summers, and my grandmother, and it was just so nice when we got there, but when we had to leave, it was just so emotional to leave everyone behind. But I just wanted to circle back to the fact that it is a full circle, because many years later, my sister and I were educated here, went to school here. She fell in love with an Italian from Biccari. So she ended up moving back to Biccari and has 2 children now. Unfortunately, she was taken ill around the pandemic time, and so she did pass away 4 years ago. But the ties are still strong, and they're still like, it's an unbelievable pull that you can't describe. So I love the town. It's my town. I was born in a little
apartment near the municipio, near the town hall.
That's
And
cool.
every time I go there, I visit. It used to be a museum years ago, and I just love it so much.
I interviewed Margaret Fontana, who now, for those of you who from New Jersey or still in New Jersey, she's now the executive director for the Italian American Heritage Association in Jersey. But she had a similar kind of thing to you, where the family would go back back to Italy every summer, and she kept saying, "But I wanted to go to Disneyland." She
Right.
said now she feels different, but she said, when you're a little kid, she said all her friends were going to Disneyland and she wanted to go there. Mike, how about you?
Well, how you doing? I'm Mike D'Imperio. My family came from Biccari in 1889 and 1895. My great-grandparents, and they settled in South Philadelphia. I just recently moved from there not too long ago. So as far as Biccari, I've been there 3 times. First time was 1991, second time was 93, and the last time was 2009. Going again in May. I even met many cousins there that told me about cousins in the US I had no idea existed. And some of them lived a few blocks from my house.
Wow.
And
Oh.
Lucia, I met her uncle over there, her Uncle Ralph. And when I came back in 91, I tried to connect with everybody in the United States that they told me about. Some people were from around Newark. Their names were Basso, Ferranti, the Galdis and Ticoni, of course. Rich Leto, his family lived on 17th Street in South Philly, which wasn't far at all. We know a lot of the same people.
That's where I lived.
We never met each other though. So, but I'm going back in May. My wife
Nice.
and daughter and boyfriend.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And Mark, last but not least.
Yeah, Mark Lucera. I'm Rich Leto's cousin, so he told you about our grandfather came from Biccari and grandmother, Aniello Lucera and Elisa Basile. They came over, he came over in 1902 and she came over in, I think, 1910. My maternal grandparents both came from the same town in Sicily, Naro Agrigento, Sicily. It's just interesting how both sets of grandparents came from the same town. Of course, I guess that's sort of common. You come over and everybody's from the same town, so they all know each other, and so it kind of makes sense that they would get together. But yeah, I got to go back to Biccari for the first time a few years ago. It was great town. The people there were fantastic, and then went again last year, and I was hoping to go in May next month to see Lucia and with Mike, but that isn't working out. But Biccari is just a great town. We just fell in love with it, really, and was really looking to buy a house over there because it's just such an historic town. It's just in great condition. The streets are clean and the people are friendly, and it's just the surrounding countryside is beautiful. You can smell the olive trees. The fragrance in the air is just fantastic. I have problems with allergies around here. When I was there, no problems. Just a beautiful place, and it's just I just love to go back. I'm just looking for an opportunity to go back.
Yeah, it is. It's so great to go back.
And as other people mentioned, we did find our grandfather's house. And so we didn't get to go inside, but we did find it. I don't know about our grandmother's house. I'm not sure if we traced that back, but yeah, it was really interesting. And it's kind of, if you think about it, a lot of people have their grandparents and they can go to visit their grandparents over here. They say, oh, my grandparents live an hour away. We visit them or whatever. Our grandparents were born in another country, another part of the world. We can't just go over there and see, the house they grew up in. So it's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, but that's true. But it certainly is interesting when you walk those streets, right?
Yeah.
It's a for people, I tell people all the time, if you haven't done it, it's
Yeah.
like everybody has to do it, I think, anyway.
Hey, Bob, let me piggyback on a couple folks here. So basically, Mark's dad and my mom were brother and sister. So they're that first generation of children of the immigrants. And me and Mark are first cousins. So that's how we're related. But a couple things related to Mike. Mike talked about a story when he went back in 91 and he found all these names that they said, you got to come back to Philadelphia and look these people up. Well, Mike and me lived 2 blocks away from each other. So Mike left a note in my mailbox for my mother, right? 2 blocks away. We never know each other not till like 3 years ago do I know that we're like connected. And we lived 3 blocks away. And then Lucia and Mark, last year, me and Mark were fortunate enough to go into that 400 AD house, and Lucia hosted us. So What an experience, and make everybody jealous here that we did that. And then lastly, I'm walking into town and I hear this lady talking English, and naturally I got to be social and say, can you tell me where you're from? And that's how I met Joanne. I only met Joanne last year. She's from Jersey. Naturally, I told her I'm from Philadelphia, and here we are, and with our history.
Yeah, so I'll tell you an interesting story about some of my research. I researching my grandmother. Her name was Luisa Piomalo, and there were only 2 Piomalos that came. It was my grandmother and her aunt. Her aunt had come about 10 years before her, and I got a message from somebody saying that I think we're researching the same person, Maria Piomalo. And I said, yes, we're definitely, I know exactly who you're talking about. And she's my great-grandfather's sister. And Linda said, are you sure? I said, I'm positive. There's no question in my mind. I know exactly who she is. So, we confirmed that on Ancestry, which I had no doubts anyway. But the interesting thing about it was our families were so very connected in the States because they were the only 2 family members here. And through the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, even up into the early 60s, they associated with each other all the time. Linda and I didn't know that. But turns out she's a 4th cousin, but how Italian families are. The 4th cousin is the 3rd cousin, the 2nd cousin, all that stuff. And so the most interesting part of the whole story is her grandmother's last name was Pedix. Her grandfather was from Sicily. And I remember my parents always talking about going to their house. And when I got married to my first wife, we were driving past the house because we wound up living about 5 blocks from them. And my father pointed out, that's Aunt Beatrice's house, which went right over my head at 21 years old. Who cares? When I was explaining to her the apartment that I lived in, her first cousin, Charles, or Gene, as they call him, he said, is that the apartment with the big long staircase? I said, yeah. And he said, I used to go there all the time. So we were probably passing each other on the street in Flushing in the 70s and didn't know it until 40 years later, So just, stuff happens, I guess, right? You make these connections. So
can I?
I'm just gonna, yeah, go ahead.
I left out Elaine. Elaine, why don't you tell how we met last year?
Oh, yeah, good.
That was quite an astounding moment for me, and it proved very fruitful. My husband and I had gone to Biccari many years ago. We were only able to stay for a few hours, didn't see much, didn't talk to very many people, but we ate lunch at the Santa Lucia Hotel. And then we were back last year. We happened to be walking by and saw the sign, and I said to my husband, I want to stop and take a picture of the sign because we had eaten there so long, all those years ago. And as we're standing there talking in English, this man comes over from the parking lot who happened to be rich and says, basically, who are you? Are you American? And we started talking, and I told them about my history, and as soon as I said my father was born in the United States, and Rich was like, well, was it Tacony or South Philly? And I said, it was Tacony, so he knew. So we bonded right then and there, and he introduced me to his cousin Eric, and I have the book that Eric wrote, and I realized that there were a whole bunch of Americans there because it was during the San Donato Festival time, and it's been really quite overwhelming, to tell you the truth, because I went to Biccari not knowing anybody or anything, whether I had any relatives or not. And in the 5 days I was there, I can't believe how many people I met. I met Lucia was there with her father. Lots of people who knew my grandparents, because they would, once they immigrated, they would go back fairly frequently to visit, and just met people who remember my grandparents, and so connected with Rich and all these people now. It just really has been overwhelming. I had no clue. Biccari Nel Mondo website I didn't know about, so it's really been quite amazing to me, and really very heartwarming and touching. And because my grandparents I grew up with, they lived in the town next to me, so we were there every Sunday for my nonna's pasta, of course. So it's really quite, it's really means a lot to me, because when I grew up, this is what my grandparents had in their house.
Nice.
You
Wow,
may
nice.
recognize the picture of the
Yeah.
Was that next to the
church.
picture?
And so I saw that growing up, and it's actually a postcard that one of their friends had sent them. And so I was always fascinated by this picture, and I said, someday I really hope I can go there. And the fact that I did was just quite amazing, and everything that's flowed from it. And I'm sure lots of people have had that experience. So.
Well, and the interesting thing about, your meeting Rich and everything, I'm a firm believer in that there are no accidents. The stuff is, meant to be.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. And when we went back to Naples, I didn't know my dad even had any first cousins there alive or anything else. And his half first cousin, who's younger than me, long story, brought us to the aunt's house, two of them in their 90 years old, my dad's first cousins. And nobody ever talked about them. I had no idea. And they had my parents' wedding photo from 1944 with my grandmother's handwriting on the back.
That's amazing.
So touching.
Yeah, it was crazy. It really, really was. So I'm just going to throw this out there because I don't know, how many people actually, actively do ancestry or anything like that. But if anybody has a really, great ancestry story, or, most of the people from the South we know are pretty much farmers. I know in my mom's family, going back through the records, finally I came across somebody who wasn't a farmer or a seamstress. He was actually like a forest ranger or something like that. So I'm just going to throw it out there for somebody to jump in if they have an interesting story that they want to talk about.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't have an answer, but I was actually wondering that myself. Rich, do you happen to know what our grandparents' families did?
No, good question.
And their house was sort of like in the middle of town, so I don't know but it didn't look like a shop of any kind. So
Good
Weren't there
question.
levels of, like, the classes, marrying into classes too? Because I know, like, my grandmother wasn't allowed to marry my grandfather. She lived in town. They owned my grandmother wasn't. Her father died in World War I, and I don't know what they did. I know they had a store, and I think she sold pasta. I think my grandmother, but then she wasn't allowed to marry my grandfather, who was a stonemason. And my great grandmother used to say over my dead body, well, she died and she married my grandfather.
That's funny,
was
because
a
you would
lot
think
of that.
that.
I'm sorry, there was a lot of that in
Yes.
the country, right? Where
But
they
you
all
went
knew
to
their
jail.
families. They all knew their families and what they did and their grandparents. And so there was a lot of, no, you can't marry this one, or this one did this. And there was a lot of that back then.
But if you were in a farm, it was one group of people, and if you were a
Yes.
stonemason, you were another. And I hear those stories a lot. I heard my grandfather had to go to jail for a couple of days because he was actually promised he promised himself to someone else because my great grandmother said no. So I don't know how that works. Paula, do you know how true that
in
is?
those in those days, as I was there, as I came as a teenager at 16, and it was very common that you would be only with those of the same status. So if you were agricultor, you stay with agricultor. If you were with the trades, you will be with the trades people and related. I know that my sister actually had like two young men. My sister Rose, that lived in Canada, and the same thing. That my parents said no, and then unfortunately, well, for her wedding, for her marriage, it was not as good as should have been. I gotta say that for my sister, to defend her, but it was very common that you had to be with your own people, your own status. And just to summarize, for what I've heard from every one of you, that's great, because now is the time really that most of the people are getting interested. I'm 75, 76 years old now, and I've seen so much even here that the second and third generation are getting more interested of the background of their grandparents and parents, where they came from. So from each one of you that I heard that you've been in Biccari, to Jovina,
Yes.
I actually knew your sister. I met her through Lorenzo, and
That's
I'm still a
right.
good friend. I'm still a good friend with Lorenzo. Every
Lorenzo's
time
my
I go there,
brother-in-law.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now that you mention, oh my God, that's his
Yes.
sister-in-law.
Yes. So Lorenzo he has the gas station at the
Yes,
very
yeah.
beginning of
Oh
town.
yeah,
So
yeah,
when you come into
That's
the
your
town,
brother-in-law?
that's my
yeah,
brother-in-law.
yeah, yeah.
Lorenzo.
Oh.
Yeah, and whenever that I returned, the first thing that he would do in the morning when I go by there, he would have a nice cesto, a nice
Oh, yes.
a basket full of figs that he
That's
just
right.
went and picked.
That's
Yeah,
right.
he's great. We have a
Because
good
Lorenzo
friendship
is
with him.
he loves nature and he has land and he's a farmer. I mean,
Yes,
he has the
yeah,
gas station and he does that business, but he
yeah,
loves to farm and he has lots of fruit and he whenever we
yes,
went there, he would bring
yeah,
peaches and, as did
yeah.
my uncles and, they also had little terreni that,
See.
that they would do that. But yes, Lorenzo's my brother-in-law.
Yeah, and in relation to also to, I believe it was Peg that mentioned about Onorato family in Geneva. And I used to know a lady there, Lucia. It was her first name. The last name I cannot remember. We used to go and visit her all the time in Geneva. So all these families that came to Geneva around Auburn too, as I mentioned, there wasn't much interest at all. I'm telling you about when we came, my own first cousins that they wouldn't even wanted to know that they were Italian. My aunt, unfortunately, one of those other families that they will not let them speak Italian or hang around more with the American. So we had the problem where my first cousin, I only knew one of them real well. And at the Bar Centrale, we've been there many times also at the Bar Centrale, right?
Yeah, my dad's bar.
Yes, and my father was a shoemaker that he lived in Philadelphia. He lived in Philadelphia for a while with my uncle Zio Assundo de Angelis. So, and my aunt Donato, my uncle was here. They changed their name to Sandrelli. I don't know why, but my father served the First World War at 17 years old, and then he came to America in 1921, and thereafter again, some of those stories about the difficulties of my mother could not pass a physical simply to a glaucoma in the eye. And then when she was 50 years old, 55, she was okay to come in 1964. So there's a lot of little stories like that it's really sad. And for whenever that I returned there, we even broadcasted the radio program from Bar Piscrilli, right underneath the church there, right, and the people dancing in the street. And from the land that my father had, I took a nice cup of soil, the dirt right from, and I took it and I have it here in my home, dearly. So all these that we have done and been in Italy, as I said, I remember much more as a teenager that when the Americana ladies came. Now the Americana ladies were even people, the lady from my hometown, but when they came, tutto bello vestito, bello, elegante, tutti i capelli fatti, and come arriva americana. So being that my boss and also with Peppino Lucera, Giuseppe Lucera, and Pasquilli, that they were musicians. Alfonso Stelluti was a teacher, and we used to go and serenade the ladies, the Americana ladies, okay, Biccaris, and thereafter, guess what? After the serenade, then we would have dinner with them. So all these memories that of Biccari and that I share with you, and what you have heard from you also, it's great that you've been there.
Yeah.
Ciro is the one that you also met at Motel Santa Lucia.
Yes.
Very, very fine friend of mine that we spent a lot of time. And 2 years ago when we come back, 2 months later, he passes away. And very,
Yes.
very sad for the whole town, for Ciro. I would like to share this with you, that this is my son when he was in the United States Marines, that he spent 4 years in Italy, in Naples, on the base there, the NATO base. He was a musician, but he served as a military police force. So when we came to Biccari, oh my God, the honor that he had and that I had, that made me so emotional, because they asked him to be part of the honor guard for San Donato at the procession. That was great to see him there.
Oh, wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So it was very, very beautiful, emotional. And as I showed you before, I want to show you again now that everybody is there.
Yeah.
Now, this is the signs that we found outside the town of Biccari. At night, I went to take one. My son went and take one, and not knowing that we both were taking the sign. I wanted to surprise him, and he surprised me when I went to Naples to his house. So, and I still have him right here, and he's got it right over his house too. So all these things that, again, that means a lot for Biccari. And I'm telling you that until I die, Biccari is going to be right here, nel mio cuore, per sempre. It's a very beautiful town, beautiful people, such as you all have mentioned. And it's been a real pleasure to have shared all these beautiful memories that you shared, that you've been to Biccari. As I said, it's nice that now the second generation are taking really deep interest to go back and see where their parents came from. Because there is something that we're proud of, and I mention always on the radio, always on my program, that these people came senza niente, and look what they created. Generations. Then now you have everything that is possibly they could do. So that's it. So
Your words,
Yeah,
Paul. Thank you.
and that's one of the things, people, that's why I do what I do, because I'm afraid that, we're losing our heritage. But I have my dirt.
All right. All right.
I have my dirt from Montebello in Calabria. And this is the inside of one of the homes. So you could see how it's in disrepair.
Beautiful.
I'd like to add something to Paolo's, just to make his heart grow a little bit more. I'm third generation, and here's my daughter. So there's 4 generations. So she's been there too. 4
Beautiful.
generations. Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Nice. Beautiful.
I wanted to say that growing up, when I was a young girl, every August we gathered for a family picnic here in like the Clifton Heights area, the Upper Darby Township area. And we would celebrate the San Donato Festival because my grandfather was named Donato. And his grandchildren would line up, and the 2 oldest would carry a San Donato statue and present it to him. So, and that was all of his nieces that would be doing this and carrying on the tradition here in Clifton Heights, Pennsylvania. So
you mentioned the name Donato. I remember growing up celebrating onomastico for my dad, name day. Did your family celebrate name days?
Yes.
yeah.
And as a matter of fact, Bob, I'm sorry to coming in, but in Italy, as you well know, probably by now, that the onomastico, they celebrate more than a birthday. A birthday is onomastico is the onomastico. And when you go there and you tell them, buon onomastico, and besides that also, when it's your onomastico, you do not receive. You're the one that offers your friends a toast. So you buy them a drink or a coffee. That's how it is there.
Oh, well, I don't like that, but the rest of the stuff is.
And my cousins, they still send me, I'm in a WhatsApp chat with all of them, and they still send me whenever it's someone in my family's name day, buon onomastico. They'll remember their birthdays, but they know when it's the name day as well.
See.
Yes.
And it's important to preserve that. I mean, I have 3 children, and we've been back to Biccari several times. And they're actually pursuing their dual citizenship now. So
Yes, that's great.
yeah, because I have both passports and I have
Yeah.
dual citizenship. So now they're pursuing that. So hopefully we can get that process started.
Yeah, and I'm
That's
doing
great.
it now, and I'm doing it mainly for my kids. I mean,
Yeah.
73. I don't know if
That's
it's
right.
going to matter for me, but I can't wait for the consulates. But what I found an attorney over there that if you petition the court, he could do up to 10 people at the same time as long as it's the same line. So
Right.
it'll
So
go
it's
quicker.
very
I hope.
difficult. It's very difficult, from what I understand, to get an appointment. My daughter was able to
Yes.
get an appointment. She just lucked out, but there are 7,000 people ahead of her right now.
Oh,
Mhm.
wow.
Yeah, well, I have 6,000 ahead of me in New York, but they don't tell you how long that's going to take.
Right.
That's the hardest part,
right.
So
But I
that's
think it
why
could
I
take
decided
like
to go.
years, like 2-3 years.
My
apparently.
appointment
least.
is November 2026.
Ah.
Yeah.
Oh
Oh,
my
wow.
God. Wow.
But I'm
Oh.
kind of okay with that because it takes a while to get the paperwork all
Yeah.
together
It does. Yeah.
and certified. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's amazing.
It's well
how
worth it.
Popular.
It's well
Yes.
worth it.
Yes.
It is.
You're lucky you got a date. So which council, what council is that? Is that
In
Florida or-
Miami. Yes,
Miami.
it's
Yeah.
In
Miami.
Miami.
Mhm.
That's what I figured. Yeah. New York, forget it. New York, Los Angeles.
The only other thing I was going to add from last year, we were fortunate when I was there with Mark, and Lucia took us to her olive grove, which she's regurgitating, meaning her land is family owned. And she took us to the cemetery, which is another experience besides walking, in the streets of the town. But I'm curious, Lucia, how long has that olive grove been in your family?
That's not that one. They sold the big one. My grandfather had bought that land to build a retirement home, but sadly, he passed away 2 months after retirement. Cancer.
Oh,
But
that's terrible. That's
but
awful.
yeah, it was sad. But so our goal has been to restore it, and kudos to this mayor. Our mayor for Biccari, it has done a lot. He's
Yes.
15 years in as mayor, and he's only 49 years old, and he knows how to write grants, and it's the only town in southern Italy that's had population growth other
Wow.
than the resort areas by the beaches. So
Yeah, the €1 homes.
right. So he's brought people in that. He's brought in people with the €1 homes. However, and there's people are coming from Spain and Germany and France, and we have the tallest mountain in the region. So he's made that a weekend resort where people can go fishing and hiking and zip lining, and there's other sports up there as well. And so he's put a camp last fall, they opened the campground, and then now that I hadn't been there for 30 years. And when my mom passed, I went with my father. And I said to my dad, please don't, they sold their house in Naples. I said, but please don't sell this. And so I took everything over, and my hope and dream now is just to go back and maybe retire part-time, to spend time there and have music festivals, which we're having our
Nice.
first next month, actually. Next month.
What a brilliant
Brava.
guy. What a brilliant guy he is. Because I've mentioned that to a few people that I know over there, that the Italian government doesn't do enough of that kind of stuff. They should be dragging Americans there a
Oh my
lot
goodness.
easier.
Yeah.
He's so, when I went to the town mayor and to the pastor, and I said, I'm a harpist, a musician. I'd like to start having some music programs here where people can explore their town. And they've given me everything that I've needed. Like,
Does he speak English?
He does not, he has a couple phrases, but no, not.
I mean, I mean, I could get somebody translate, but I'd love to talk to him about that and interview him.
He
And I
loves-
could get somebody to translate. So if you could put
Right.
me in touch with him, I'd love it.
We can
uh,
do that. I think,
I-
I think you asked him to come on today, didn't you?
I did. He
Yeah.
never replied.
Yeah, he's
Busy.
crazy.
I know
Bob,
somebody,
super
in
busy.
Italy that'll torture him
Yeah.
to be on. So
Bob,
that's-
Bob, if
Yeah.
you like to, if you want to make a Zoom, I'll be glad to be with the mayor and yourself. I interviewed him before, on my radio
Oh,
program.
okay. Yeah,
Yes, I did.
if you
Yeah. So
can.
if you
Can I ask a quick question? Does anybody know if you have to be an Italian citizen to buy a house there?
No,
No.
No,
You don't.
no.
but you want to become a resident for tax purposes.
Okay.
And you can retire there as long as you have enough passive income, and it's not a lot. It's I don't know, 26,000 euros per person or something like that.
How long do you have to be there to be a resident? Is it at least?
Call me.
Well, I'm sorry.
Call me.
Oh, okay.
I have a short question for Mike, if you don't mind.
Sure.
It's not a Biccari related. My maiden name is Ferranti. My father was a barber, and I heard you mention that name. And we lived on 1600 block of South 17th Street. I didn't know if.
In South Philly?
Yeah, yeah. My
Yeah,
dad was a barber right across the street from St. Thomas Church.
Right. I know exactly where it is. I don't know any there. The Ferrantis I knew were married and they lived in Newark.
Okay, no,
Yeah.
No.
But it's 1600 South 17th?
yeah.
That's 17th of Mars, right around there.
Between Tesker and Morris, we were in the middle of the block, 1629. My dad was Abruzzese, born in Castellafrentano, which is Czechia area, not far. We did find some Cristinzianos, going back to why I'm here, in Lucerna. First cousin to my father-in-law. And
Cousins that were the Febos lived in that area.
oh, really?
The
Okay.
Febos, my aunt had 15 kids.
Oh, God bless her.
That's a
His
lot of
first
kids.
cousin, his first cousin married Resi, who is an attorney and worked for the state. But that's about the only information we have on the Cristinzianos. We don't have a location. We were very fortunate that we have a friend from Abruzzese that is a curator and does research, and she took us to the capital, or I guess it's not a capital, maybe it's a Foggia. That's where everything was filed. And we went through the records and we were able to find out a little bit more. And that's how we found the Resi family. And his mother was a Cristinziano whose father came to America and went back and settled there. One of the
Say
brothers
Renzi?
settled in South America, in Argentina. But
Did you say Renzi, Renzi?
no, Rizzi, Rizzi,
Oh, okay.
state attorney in that area.
Well, Bob, if I can close out a little bit on
Thank you.
I appreciate you hosting us. I mean, I subscribe to Bob's. He's interviewed me. He's interviewed Eric and a host of and Carla, and the stories that are just memorialized thanks to Bob are they're preserved. Paolo, you trust me, right?
I appreciate.
Mhm.
I appreciate.
It's heartwarming, and just
Yeah, thank you. There's another thing.
Thank you, Bob. Can I share this with you? This one, it's the old Biccari, 19. Let me see, 1930, 1920, 30. That's the old Biccari, the piazza there where the fountain is.
Oh,
I remember
Okay.
the fountain before
Yeah.
they took it down. I was a little girl,
Right.
and I always
And
remember
then
that
this,
fountain.
this other one, then it's of Biccari way back. When was that? Let me see here. I lost that. And there is also an old postcard
Mhm.
that there is here. They used to have a lot of postcards. But the other one is something special because it goes back to 1920, like that, when nothing was there at all. Yeah, and I remember when they placed the fountain there, and then they removed that. There is some Peg, I believe I said about Onorato. They're cousin of mine in Biccari, Onorato.
Oh, yes.
Yes, yeah.
Very nice.
So, the cousins of mine. Now that you mentioned that.
And the
Beautiful.
Honoratos, as I did my research, the family actually came all the way from Crispano near Napoli.
Yeah.
And they moved to Biccari in the early 1800s.
Oh.
Hi, Mark. I think you wanted to get something in there before we close. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say it was really interesting how we were talking about classes and status and everything, and I was just wondering if we would have talked to each other if we still lived in Biccari.
That's a good one.
It's funny how that
Good.
you go away and you come back and it's all washed clean.
My parents would not have, well, they came from two different places, but their classes were so far off, it wouldn't even been a thought. I think my dad would have been run out of town on a rail. But listen, thanks everybody. I appreciate it.